All right. And welcome back, you guys, to the Self Selecting Podcast. I am your host, Cory Hagman. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here. It is a dreary, just gloomy morning. I'm recording about 2 hours earlier than I normally would. Still a little bit on East Coast time. I just got back from New York, and I mean, there the wake up times I was up between 5 and 6 pretty consistently, and I'll be heading back there pretty soon here, so I don't want to completely lose that. Um, yeah, I would love to get some natural light in here. It is probably not going to happen. So, we're doubling up on the coffee because this room is dark. I got a floodlight in my face, and I mean I'm awake. I'm awake. I'm excited to talk to you guys. Uh, it's been a while since I've been able to record just because of the travel, and I got some good topics today, in this video specifically. You already know because you clicked on it and you can see the title and you saw the thumbnail. Uh, we're talking about something that I get asked pretty commonly, and that is, are you subject to a body fat set point? Is there a certain body fat, a certain body weight, body type, that you're just stuck with, that you are not going to be able to break through, like a ceiling or a floor, or you just like it's the cards you're dealt? Is that real? Is that something that you're subject to? So that's what we're getting into today. Real quick though, coaching. Coaching, one-on-one coaching is open. One-on-one consultations are open. This does not have to be PED related. It can be lab work related. It can be nutrition related. It can be training. It can be posing. I don't really do the life coaching or mentorship, but I did have a girl recently. She's like, hey, I'm in my mid 20s and I just need some help, some general direction. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Everything feels like it's on fire. If you want to pay me and you wanna talk about it, I can, at least tell you how to not make the mistakes I made. That is not a life coaching plug, just to be clear. Um, Somachems, if you are interested in peptides, if you are having trouble sourcing quality peptides, this was formerly Amino Asylum. I used them well before I ever got a discount code. I mean, we're talking years. Very pleased. That is who I send all my athletes to. That's who I go through. That's who I've sent family members peptides from. Code Cory Fit. It saves you a little bit of money, and if we're looking at the GLP-1s, you kind of want to save as much as you can. They have all three of them. Retatrutide, that's one I've done a few videos on, maybe not. I don't know if I've actually done them here for you guys. I've done them on Patreon, which Patreon tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, 4 bonus episodes every single month on tier 3 if you just can't get enough. Uh, for bonus episodes, sometimes I take people's case studies and I'll just like kind of work through either lab work, their protocol, give my input, but lots more content if that's something you're looking to subscribe to, whatever tier makes the most sense. But tier 3 is where you get 4 additional episodes. Some are drug related, some are abstract, some are me just bullshitting. Uh, yeah, all that being said, Soma Kim's Cory Fit, if you need anything, if you need things that you're having trouble getting, you're like, there's 1,000 peptide companies out there, that's who I go with. That's who I would recommend. So, are body fat set points real? And what you can do when you feel totally stuck. So, this came up in a client check in this past week, but it also came up on a client consultation call. So, sometimes I'll have clients who they're like, hey, I just want to dig into it with you, and they don't do like the weekly calls that I offer. Some of my clients they meet with me 20 minutes a week every single week. It's just more efficient that way. And then others are like, I just want to book the consultation calls in addition, so we get like a full block of time, and maybe it's a little more comprehensive, in essence of like what kind of topic we're discussing or what they want to go over. But it's been something that over the years, I mean, like I get this question pretty frequently. Are you subject to a specific body fat that you can't really get under? And I'm bringing this up because in this past check in, a client of mine who we've been losing weight for about 12 weeks, full transparency, her adherence has not been 100%. It has not been sharp. It's not been bad. And there's been context that I would say is very allowable. She has moved herself. She's gone through like major surgeries that now like may become, more, she might have to have another surgery, but basically, so a lot of personal stress. Her kids are getting a little bit older. There's different life challenges there. And this is the first time that she's, really been on a structured program where the food reporting and nutrition aspect of it is like under a microscope. So she came to me and she's like, I can't lose fat. And the first question I ask is like, "Well, how much are you eating? And how accurate and honest are you being about how much you're eating?" She's like, well, my coach doesn't know my macros. She doesn't know my calories. I follow a meal plan and it kind of changes. I've honestly never taken a second to really dig into how much I'm eating, but I pretty much eat this, in addition to a few treats each week, which, like, I kinda stopped telling her about. And in this fat loss phase that I'm taking her through, she's lost weight. She's had some weeks where training hasn't been perfect, meaning that, like, on her program, she's had 4 or 5 days that we've agreed to her doing, and some weeks she's only done 2. Sometimes cardio slips and, like, maybe she gets 50% of, like, the weekly total. For those of you who aren't familiar with my clients, I do instruct them to do a weekly allotment of cardio. I find that from an adherence standpoint, it just works out so much better this way because then they're able to plug it in wherever they see fit. They're not locked into like getting up at some ungodly hour before work to go do an hour cardio because it must be fasted. Spoiler, it doesn't have to be. And over the course of the last 12 weeks, she's lost about 6 pounds. And this isn't a small amount. It's not something that happened accidentally. It's very much because she's been in a deficit. But she did come to me with higher expectations. And now we're at the point, we have looked at labs and I've told her, I'm like, if you want more fat loss, if you want to see things move more quickly, at a faster rate week to week, and you want to see those physical changes that you initially described, this is going to require a higher degree of discipline. Maybe even not higher degree of discipline, but just better execution. For some people, better execution does not actually require more discipline. And that can, it blows some people's mind. They're like, oh, I thought to like get better progress, I had to really lock in. And it's like, for some, locking in still doesn't result in more progress, better progress. Your perception of how hard you're working, like, truthfully, is kind of irrelevant compared to whether or not you're executing. And I'm going to dive into the conversation I went into with this client, for you guys, because it is something that for a long time I kind of questioned myself. When I was coming up in bodybuilding, I just had no perception of the amount of muscle I had as opposed to body fat, even though I had body fat tests done. When I actually assessed my physique, there were always points on my physique that I was like, I just can't get the definition and the cuts and the visibility that other girls seem to have. And there was a point where I started to accept like maybe I have thicker skin. That was y'all remember, some of y'all who've been around in the space for a while. That was a big like thing for many bikini competitors, is that you can't get conditioned because your skin is too thick or your estrogen is too high. That's still kind of a thing right now. And point aside, that's for another video. But I started to believe this. I started to believe that even though my core, my shoulders, my back were like shredded, I'm like, maybe it's just something like physiologically wrong, like hormonally wrong with my lower body. Maybe that's why I can't see the definition that I'm after. For some people, this is very specific to a body part in which it just doesn't visibly or aesthetically look the way they think it should, at a certain body weight. For others, it's actually seeing the scale weight drop below a certain point. They've never seen it, so they have no proof of concept. So they start to question, like, can I actually get under said body weight? This is what I'm going to do today. Whether you're a competitor, whether you are like a super competitive competitor, someone who's like really committed to bodybuilding as a whole, whether you're a recreational athlete, whether you're a casual dieter, whether you're someone who has no interest in getting on stage, male, female, age aside, hormonal status aside, whether you use drugs or not, we're going to break down some of the myths, and I'm going to actually give you a practical strategy on body fat set points, whether or not there is any credence in this, whether or not you are stuck at a certain percentage or a certain weight, and how to get unstuck. So, if you're familiar with my other videos, you know that language, definitions, like we need to be very specific when we're speaking and when we're asking these questions. So, you'll hear from a lot of different schools of thoughts about set points and about what it actually takes to get shredded, to get under 15% body fat, to get to 10% body fat. And I'm speaking more to like the biological female. Also, by the way, I have videos specifically on how to get shredded, how to get under 15% or get to 15%. I'm probably going to do one today about how to get to 10% because that was something that like additionally came through as like, hey, I love the 15%. What about the next 5%? Now, in this video, we're really going to hone in on this like this firm belief that literally you can't get leaner at a certain point. That metabolically there's a roadblock, that hormonally there's a roadblock, that your biological age is going to eventually impede your ability to get shredded. And the truth is, these terms, they get used a lot, and set point in itself can mean very different things to very different people. So it's important, first and foremost, to define what we're talking about. So, number one, metabolic adaptation. Is this real? Uh, it is, yes, there's an adaptation when you lose weight. There is actually a downshift in thyroid function, and it's really unfair. Like, it's really fucking dumb. It's like 7 to 10 days being in a diet, like being in a deficit, that you begin to see thyroid function because it works on a feedback loop. It begins to downregulate. And this is how impressive and intelligent our bodies are. We pick up on even the smallest changes. So, sleep, stress, energy intake, energy output, and your body will start to take in this information and adjust accordingly. This like adjustment, this modification to the hormones it's producing and the amount that it's producing, this is your homeostatic compass because essentially your body is just trying to create balance. It's trying to keep you safe. It doesn't care about you getting shredded. It doesn't matter what your aspirations are. It is always going to adjust accordingly. Now, metabolic downshifts relative to your hormones, relative to thyroid function, your circulating sex hormones, cortisol. Like, yes, that is something that does happen. And it's very much based on the experience of stress and how you're able to regulate your stress, how you're able to manage it. So, you've heard probably at this point, if you are new to the channel, I have a video specifically on cortisol. It's a short one. It's like, I don't know, it's like 10, 15 minutes. It was a while back. And in it, I'm going directly into like the effects cortisol has on strength training, on sleep, on well-being, on libido, on fat loss, on muscle building. And these are things that we do expect in a fat loss phase. We do expect them to become dysregulated. But it really comes down as far as like whether there's going to be an adaptation that is going to impede or slow fat loss. It really comes down to your perception of both real and perceived stress. And this includes your level of discomfort, the degree in which you are stressed out about your diet. So some people, they're very, very accustomed to sitting at a low body fat level. Some people's hunger signaling does favor, I would say, more so maintenance, whereas others like they cope with stress by eating and eating in excess, and they're not very present and tuned into how they're feeling. So it's very easy to overfeed. And regardless of, whether this is a chemical issue, there are individuals who are more so predisposed to lower levels of leptin, meaning that they are not as sensitive to feeling full, meaning it takes a lot more food for them to actually feel full. Regardless of this, how you perceive what you're doing, like your level of discipline that you have to exercise, that is ultimately going to run up a scoreboard in the background. And that's what I call dietary fatigue. If you're someone who has a very low level skill of dieting, meaning you've had little experience, you have very minimal like coping mechanisms and strategies on managing dietary fatigue, then even a very small deficit is probably going to stress you out. It's probably going to be a heavier lift, metaphorically. Some people, you tell them like, hey, let's cut 500 calories. Let's start doing, 2 hours of cardio a week. They're like, cool, like nothing changes physiologically. Now, there are ways that you can improve your skill of dieting, and that's something I fully believe that, like, we need to be more empathetic with people coming to us coaches and professionals and understand that, like, not everyone is at the same benchmark. Not everyone knows these coping skills or realizes the magnitude that different approaches can have in terms of managing dietary fatigue. This is also why we need to make sure that if we're trying to lose fat, we're not just kind of holding static and accumulating dietary fatigue in the background. That will happen. So that's one component of the metabolic adaptation is really your perception of stress, and I guess really two components. Your perception of stress, how well you're able to handle the diet itself, but then like chemically, hormonally, the changes that happen at your actual metabolism. Now, separate from that, there also is an adaptation depending on how much weight you lose. This, I think, is very overstated, and I'll tell you why. So, most of the bodybuilding preps that I've done, I've come down from anywhere from 140 to 150 pounds down to about 120, sometimes even under that. Now, in the instance where I went about 20, 25 ish pounds down, this last contest prep, I was very strict with tracking like so much data, an obnoxious amount of data. I tracked my heart rate as I did cardio and as I got smaller. And a lot of people don't believe this. Like, I mean, not necessarily to me, they just don't believe this is possible. But in this process of going from like 142, 143 down to like 116, I made very minimal adjustments to my calories. Like, I think the first week I was around 1,600. Um, I dropped it the next week because I saw like I wasn't seeing the rate of change that I wanted to. So I went down like another 100 calories just to see did that make a difference. Um, Over the course of, let's say, I think it was like 15 to 20 weeks. I progressed cardio. I increased the duration, but I kept the intensity and like target heart rate very consistent the entire time. I never got up to more than an hour a day. And that was like very, very much towards the end of the contest prep. Even then, there was really only like 1 week towards the tail end where I went down to like 1,300 calories on my non-training days, and, spoiler, this show I came in much, 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 much too lean. So this was a, like, overcorrection, but it also, like, goes to show even without changing calories, I mean, like, you aren't going to necessarily adapt to a specific caloric amount. But I'll say, like, the big asterisk here is that I was incredibly strict with food reporting. I didn't do cheat meals. There was very low opportunities, reduced opportunities for me to overeat. I weighed everything raw. I tracked my vegetables. Like this, I know it sounds very OCD, and for like recreational athletes or casual dieters or for people not in bodybuilding, that can sound very disordered. But keep in mind, like, I'm a professional bikini competitor, and this was my first time prepping myself for a professional show, and I wanted to make sure that like there was no room to fuck this up, to not come in as conditioned as I needed to. And I mean, like, you'll have seen the pictures, like I really, really overshot it. And I'm proud of that. But when it comes to that metabolic adaptation, like how much did I actually burn from these cardio sessions? Because weightlifting is highly variable. You don't burn a lot of calories from just lifting weights. The cardio sessions themselves, like I tracked it with my Apple Watch. I tracked, cardiovascular endurance, and there's an adaptation there. I got better at cardio the more I did it. The calories that I burned, I mean, like they weren't nearly as much because I also lost like 20 pounds, but there wasn't this huge drop off. Like, I mean, by the time I got to 120, I was still able to maintain a heart rate of still like something pretty manageable, closer to like 120, 130, using the same settings on the treadmill, using the same percentage of incline, using the same speed. And I found that, like, I mean, yes, like I adapted cardiovascularly, but it's not like I just stopped losing body fat or stopped burning calories because I began to adapt. So, I think the actual change, I remember I did the math, it was like maybe like 100, 140, 50 calorie difference. But when you look at body mass, going from like 140 down to a little under 120, I mean, that is a significant drop for someone who's only 140 now, then, or at that time, 120. That's a pretty high percentage of my total body weight. So, We have to consider that. How much weight are you actually losing? Um, can you expect to burn the same amount of calories, specifically with something like cardio, if all variables are held constant? If you lose a lot of weight, like mass moves mass, it costs more energy for you to move more weight around, especially if you have a high degree of muscle. But for individuals who lose big chunks of weight, we'll see a downshift there as well, but not nearly to the degree that you think, and not to a point that you're just going to have a cessation of fat loss. And that's where I think the definitions around this are incredibly important because there's like impedance, reduction, slowing, and then cessation. And like you're not going to hit a wall where you just can't lose fat. This is the thing that I want you to take away from this. If there's one key point, I really hope Emily clips this. You are not going to stop losing body fat even if your hormones are suboptimal. Even if you're clocking in with a TSH of 2.0, 3.0, even if you got triple zeros on your sex hormones, your testosterone is shit, you're not ovulating, it doesn't mean that a deficit won't work for you. A deficit will always work. By definition, a deficit will put you in a position where overall weight will go down, and hopefully it is body fat depending on outside variables. But with that being said, it might cost more for you to lose weight. It might take more effort. It's almost like you're paying a tax on your effort. So even though you're putting forth the same amount of effort, you're in the same kind of deficit, things might be slower. How much slower? It really depends. There's not a one size fits all answer. Now, let's dig into your hormones when they start dropping, because this is very much tied to allostatic load, meaning your perception of stress, your perception of what you're doing. And I kind of already dug into that pretty heavily earlier, but yes, thyroid function, that will change pretty quickly. This is why I think, we know the safety profile around T4, T3. I think it's something a lot of people are afraid of and they don't quite understand. Oftentimes in our space, it's abused, it's used for too long, or it's used inappropriately, or it's used at doses that then cause unwanted effects. So, within the scope of using it as basal support, I see it actually to be something that can be really favorable. I mean, it's absolutely something that you should have labs for in most cases, but let's cut into the changes for our other hormones, your sex hormones, your testosterone, your estrogen, your progesterone, even cortisol. So, although, yes, the safety profile of thyroid replacement hormone, T4, T3, I think is generally well studied. And it's something that, as a medical community, as a society, like we understand the risk factor pretty well. Getting labs is always helpful in getting an understanding of what your baseline is, but this same rule of thumb, the same logic should be applied to all of our other hormones, all of our other values, because too often I hear people make the claim this diet or this coach, it wrecked my metabolism, it wrecked my hormones without ever having an understanding of what their baseline was before. If you don't know what your baseline is, you have no scope of the change that, the diet or the coach or the training protocol had. Now, that to say, like, there are really poor practices in our space, low fat diets that correlate strongly with individuals having downregulation in their hormones. So, yes, like we can make some causal relationship to this, but without a baseline beforehand, we have no idea as to whether or not your hormones are exactly what they were before the diet. And I'll just tell you, like, I do this professionally. I get top athletes, I get professionals, I get individuals who are very committed to the sport and they are in their seasons for long stretches. Many athletes are not competing with optimal levels. So the idea that, like, okay, the reason I can't compete or get as lean as these other competitors is due to the fact that my hormones are suppressed or suboptimal. I want to clarify that because it's a pretty big misunderstanding. Many athletes can get lean with these levels. It's just not ideal. And it does have other effects, because those hormones are now taking away from their ability to retain muscle, lose fat, recover from these sessions, and even in some cases build muscle if we're talking about that intentional growth phase. Now, what about amenorrhea? Anovulation. So, anovulation, having a period but not actually ovulating, amenorrhea, not having a period. These terms are often convoluted, they're misused. Even if you get a bleed, it doesn't mean you're ovulating. And there are, I would say, symptoms and signs of ovulation, but without lab work, we really can't be sure. This is why even if you're like, okay, like I get my period all the way to show day, I get my period no matter how lean I get, I still wanna do my due diligence with my clients. I'm like, we gotta get laps and we gotta get them timed at a specific point in your cycle because your estrogen and progesterone, they don't have the same values if we get them done in the follicular phase versus at ovulation versus late luteal. The timing really assigns the value. So when we look at losing your period or losing ovulation, it doesn't always happen. For some people, they are very accustomed to these states and just generally physically how they handle stress is superior. There are other individuals who don't get very lean. And it's not a conscious thing. Let me just say that. This isn't like, oh, you just need to handle your stress better. It's something rather that your body kind of decides this is a non-critical function, that being reproduction. So the analogy I like when I'm talking about how someone physically handles stress is, you know how growing up, different parents, different families, they had different expectations for their children and how they discipline them. In high school, like some parents, they would be like, yo, you got a B plus on your test. I'm taking away your car keys. You're grounded. You're not leaving the house. You have all these extra chores. I actually had a friend growing up in high school. Her dad was so strict. He would make her do workouts based on her grades. And like he had her like go to the teachers with a contract to basically sign, like if she acted up, they were obligated to like email him. Super, super strict. Definitely fucked her up as an adult, I presume. Uh, on the other hand, there were kids who, I mean, like, they would come home drunk, they would be past curfew, they would, girls, they'd sneak boys into their room, and, like, their parents would be like, "Hey, like, can you not do that?" And that was the extent of the conversation, or sometimes there was never even a conversation. Different ends of the spectrum of what the expectation is, and it's very similar to how our bodies operate. Some of you watching this, some of us are very sensitive to shifts in energy fluctuations, meaning the food we eat and then the amount of energy we spend. So always think of like calories in, calories out, kind of like a budget, income and then expenses. And for some of us, it doesn't even take getting super low body fat for our body to take away the keys or to ground us. And it can basically send signals that reproductive function is no longer critical and it's not something we can allocate resources towards. This is very dependent on what your baseline is. And if you don't know your baseline, if you don't know if you're ovulating, that's the starting point. That's what we need to understand first and foremost before you ever enter a diet. You can't manage what you don't measure. And that's where a lot of people, they have that misstep of thinking just because I'm getting a period means I'm good. I don't need any kind of support and I can spend a little bit longer in this deficit or in a surplus. There are a lot of individuals who, even though they're at higher body fats, even though they're technically, not in this aggressive fat loss phase, their body still doesn't trust them relative to reproductive function. And to kind of close this loop, hormonal status, like I said, it's not going to cause a cessation in fat loss. Like you can continue to lower your calories, but it's going to make it that much harder and it is going to make it less predictable. And the last point I want to make is like, this belief that you just can't get leaner. It's so, so false. And a lot of people, they fall victim to this. They just think that like, well, it's not in the cards. Like genetically, I'm predisposed to stay above 15 or 18 or 25%. It might take more suffering and accuracy than you're prepared for, which that is the brutal truth. This is the one, I hope Emily clips this. This is the one that I wish people told me, like in my corner. I wish like coaches, boyfriends, friends, I wish they were more honest with me. And I understand, like, they probably thought I was too sensitive or just couldn't handle it. It's uncomfortable to be real with someone and be like, your current execution is just, it's good, but it's not going to get you there. Or the time it's going to take for you to get to that body fat or that body weight, that dietary fatigue is going to get so high that you're just going to crack. And that's, kind of going back to what I was saying initially. Dietary fatigue accumulates whether or not you lose weight, whether or not you lose fat. So make the time that you're spending in a fat loss phase in a deficit, make it worth it. Make progress, like have KPIs, have objective targets that you're hitting each and every week. And if it's not working, don't be afraid to pivot. I have these conversations every single week. And There was a client that I spoke with one-on-one who she was really distraught. She's like, "I just don't think I can get under 145." And I told her, I'm like, everything in your sheet, like, it says, like, you're following what I told you to do. It says you're hitting, like you're saying, you're reporting that you're hitting the macros, you're reporting that you're doing the cardio. Is there any room for error in either food reporting, how you're tracking? Are there slip ups happening? Are there things that you don't realize? Are you cooking with the food? Are you weighing things not raw? Like, are you weighing it cooked? Are you, changing your cooking methods? Are you having meals that you're like accounting for in MyFitnessPal, but the way you're logging them is, not really honest and not very accurate. And, she assured me, she's like, no, like I couldn't be more strict. And that's like really the question I find like final boss. I'm like, can you be better with food reporting? And I'll tell you as a coach, if the answer is ever yes, then that typically is the association I make. I'm like, okay, like this person just needed a little nudge in that direction that, like, hey, this matters. This matters way more than you think. And it just means like you're going to have to be more accountable. So this kind of leads into the framework that I'm going to recommend. If this is you, if you're like, I can't get under 135, I can't get under 130, I can't get under 18% body fat or whatever it might be, this is what I would do. If I was struggling, if I felt like I was stuck and I was just like, I don't have an answer. Step one, increase food reporting if possible. Reduce untracked overages, reduce bites, licks. If you are using oil, start weighing that shit. For the record, if you're doing anything and you're not weighing it, if you're not taking like a very clear and like brutal inventory of what's going in your mouth in terms of calories, then like start doing that. Um, Also, like, sub bullet here, if you're not tracking sodium, and, like, I just had a client yesterday who's like, "I don't know why I didn't lose weight." Like, we're doing I did all the cardio this week. I even, like, did a little bit more, and I asked him, like, "Okay," like, I know he likes to get, like, rotisserie chicken, and, like, sometimes I'll get prepped proteins, and I was like, "Okay, so what happened this day?" Because there was, like, a 4-pound overage the next day. I'm like, "What did you eat? Like, walk me through your meals." And he's like, "Well, I got some barbacoa from the butcher." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." And I was like, was it seasoned?" He's like, "Well, yeah, but, like, it's just their normal seasoning." I'm like, "How often do you eat this?" He's like, "I mean, not very often. It's some place, like, my wife likes to go, and, like, I figured it would be good, and I really wanted, some protein, like, that I didn't have to prep." And I'm like, they like, I love cooking meat. Like, I love cooking, like, period, but I love, like, doing, like, dry brines, and I'll tell you, like, the last time I followed a recipe for, like, a skirt steak, it had, like, 7 grams of sodium in 2 pounds of meat, and I mean, like, between Jordan and I, like, we each had almost, like, I mean, like, I think he had over a pound, but I had somewhere close to a pound, and I'll tell you, like, 4 grams extra of sodium, it matters. It will cause you to retain more water. So, under the aspect of food reporting, if you're not aware of your sodium intake, if you're making like at home soups, if you're doing anything where sodium is just finding its way in, it doesn't matter if you're aware of these like overages like they're not deviations. It's just like building awareness around things that could be fucking with your scale weight or fucking with your progress. So, this goes into point number two. Identify artificial inflations, things that muddy up scale weight. And I actually have a whole video on this. Is it a hormonal imbalance or is it an artificial inflation? There are so many things day to day that can screw with scale weight. And this is why I like capturing 7 data points because it one gives us an average. So it reduces the chance that we're going to use basically a super low weigh-in or a super high weigh-in that's not 100% accurate to make decisions about any kind of changes we make to our deficit the next week. So, real quick, wake time, that's a common one I see. People will normally wake up at 7. When they wake up at 5, they're like, I don't know why I'm up 2 pounds. GI regularity. How much you poop, the consistency, whether or not you're hydrated, fluid balance, whether or not you have an earlier wake time and then you don't poop before your weigh in, whether you get up for an early flight and you're just like, hey, like I got maybe one REM cycle altogether, going to sleep at a different time. Like your sleep duration and quality matters so, so much. This is why having consistent sleep hygiene is so like it's imperative if you're wanting to reduce artificial inflations, making sure that you have a very clear idea of like, I go to bed and I fall asleep between let's say 9 and 10 p.m. So if you get in bed at 9:15 and you're typically used to getting in bed at 8:30 and like you're not even asleep till 10:30, that's pushing it back. And if you wake up at the same time every day, well, you just lost a pretty meaningful amount of sleep. And this is even more so the case for individuals who experience interrupted sleep, sleep apnea, who pee a lot during the night, who go to bed and they like generally just feel more anxious or like kind of wired and tired at the same time. Hormonal shifts. I always notice that like the level of perceived anxiety that happens for me pretty much at the times when estrogen goes up. Now, estrogen goes up 2 times a month. It goes up in and around ovulation and then shortly after that. Now, if you're not making enough progesterone to offset that second spike in estrogen, which spoiler, that's also what you need to actually ovulate. If you're not doing that, then that last part of the cycle, that could be anywhere from 5 to 10 days to even 14 days. That can be pretty intrusive and that can cause a lot of, I mean, internal stress, like physically feeling stress, but it can also alter your hormones in a way that does, reflect, I would say, like essentially it's reflected on your scale weight. I noticed for me, the week before my period, it doesn't matter if I am shredded, it doesn't matter if I am 100% on track, if all my ducks are in a row, which like I've gotten looser with these things. Like it's not something you need to be crazy obsessive about or neurotic. I still notice, like, every week every month on repeat, there is about 4 to 5 days where even if, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do and there's no accidental overages, scale weight will go up, which then will shift my average. If this is 1 week a month, if assuming that it falls on, a clean week, so it just messes up 1 week, okay, that's easy to identify. But sometimes this can happen across 2 weeks. So now you have 2 weeks where the rate of loss is actually less than what you would anticipate. This is why the data to me, like the numbers and objectives on the weigh-ins, is so important to have all 7 days. You can't piece together this information if you don't have 7 data points. If you're only taking that one weigh-in and you're like, well, this is also a weigh-in after I didn't sleep, and it's also a weigh-in when estrogen is peaking, and it's also a weigh-in where like I feel kind of backed up or at a high sodium meal, artificial inflations. Inflammation from training. I can tell you when I do check-ins, if I do them after a lower day, my glutes are bigger on my measurements. My waist, not necessarily bigger, but I don't have that same dryness and like the cuts aren't as deep. My legs don't look as good as like tight. They just look a little more swollen. And it's something that like you can notice and be like, my legs are swollen today because I had a good session yesterday. Or I have DOMs from 2 days ago. It's not something you have to react to. It's not something that you necessarily need to intervene. But if I take, let's say, my measurements, my scale weight after a leg day that's not as intense, or after an upper day, or 3 days after a lower day, or after a rest day, everything is lighter. I don't have the same kind of inflammation that I do, and not nearly to the extent I do after a lower body session. And what I would do is if you're noticing that there are several points throughout the week where you're experiencing muddying, artificial inflations, make a note of it. Just like ding it and be like, okay, so maybe I don't need to track this a day. Like I don't need to count this as far as the average goes because there is a 4 pound fluctuation because I had an extra 4 grams of sodium. You don't have to factor it in if it truly is that like muddy and it's affecting your average that much. Number 3, increase the deficit slightly. So let's say right now you're only seeing a half pound come off your average each and every week. That's encompassing 7 real or relatively accurate data points. If you're only seeing a half pound come off, then that means by definition, you're in about a 250 calorie deficit per day. So if you were to increase this by another 250 calories, this means that you should relatively see 1 pound come off each week. Now, if you're unsure, if you're like, hey, I'm seeing point 0.2 or I'm point 0.3, and I don't know how many of these are artificial, I don't know if this is truly where I'm at. I mean, you can do what we've talked about thus far, or you can just slash the calories and get that confirmation. Because for most people, I have another client who, I mean, we check in like every week and she was super frustrated the first 8 weeks. And I'm like, you're not training that hard and you're not moving that much and you don't have that much muscle and like you struggle to get in like 4 to 5,000 steps a day. Like I told her initially, I'm like, this is like the easiest way to create the deficit. And even so, like she's like, okay, like I'm going from 2,000 to 5,000. Like that's a big jump, right? I'm like, it is. It's just the fact is you're not moving much. If you are struggling to see scale weight come off, increase the deficit and see if that gets you to where you're trying to go, or if you're not seeing any progress, if you're seeing no like change in scale weight and you can't increase food reporting and there's nothing you can do to like, make things more consistent in terms of your weigh-ins, increase the deficit, either lower food a little bit or increase cardio. And I want to say this because I do empathize. Like there is a sensitivity to going below a certain amount of food. Some people, they have this idea that like under 1,400 calories, under 1,300, under 1,100, or at 1,000. Like, I'm gonna break my metabolism. I'm gonna ruin, the thing is, like, for many people, yes, this isn't sustainable. And that's the bigger issue is that if you stay at this amount of food, you're probably not going to be able to adhere to it. So it might not make sense for you to go down to such low calories, but at least temporarily, I'll say it will at least confirm that, like, hey, it is possible. But then we kind of go up to like our third point in this, I don't know, breakdown. It just means that for you to lose the amount of weight you want to lose, you're going to have to be more aggressive and more disciplined and more strict than you can technically do with your current skill of dieting. And that is a hard truth. That's something that I think for myself, I probably wasn't prepared to hear that early on when I, struggled to hit 1,400 calories. I didn't have the right tools. I didn't have enough self-awareness to know like, okay, like it is possible. It's just not possible with what I'm willing to do. Like, I'm not willing to make that bargain at this point. And I'll say number 4, this isn't something you have to wait to do. You can get it done as soon as, you decide that it's worth doing. But checking your labs. And this is where I do have a video on the 21 labs I would get done if you at all are curious about what's happening internally. If you think that your metabolism is super slow and you might need some HRT relative to testosterone, estrogen, thyroid, if you're concerned and you feel like, hey, something's really wrong, then we need those labs to go off of. And I would definitely go watch that video because it is short. It's like 10-15 minutes. And I break down exactly what you should get, why you should get it, the timing relative to a few of them, because you do need to time them if you're a biological female and you're having a period. Listen, the body definitely adapts, but sometimes what feels like a plateau is actually just the result of small, unnoticed changes, like being looser with food tracking because dietary fatigue is accumulating in the background and you don't really know how to cope with it. This is where communicating that with the coach and being really honest, like, hey, I'm noticing some behaviors and some tendencies with food reporting that slowly are chipping away at my adherence. If that's happening, the best thing you can do is own it and figure out, okay, what's the solution? And maybe that's backing off of cardio. Cardio is driving up hunger. Maybe we need to restructure the deficit. Maybe you'll find that you can actually stick to lower calories if you're not doing so much cardio. Maybe it's the fact that you don't have enough recovery. Maybe you're working out and lifting weights too many days. Maybe you're not getting enough sleep. Like there's a lot of ways that we can troubleshoot adherence beginning to, struggle. And that's where like with adherence, we want to catch that. I almost think about it like yellow, orange, red. If you are waiting until you're in the red and you are ready to, fall off the wagon, you're ready to binge, you're going to get froyo and like you're just like hoarding a bunch of snacks and you're mowing through them. There's very little we can do outside of stop dieting. Like that's probably going to be the answer. When we look at someone who is noticing these changes and being very present and aware with them as they're happening, as they first begin to happen, this is where we can implement some strategies and we can hopefully like correct. And I almost equate it to like speed wobbles, like on a scooter, on a bike. You don't want to freak out and you don't want to ignore it to where you crash. If we can like slowly course correct, I mean, you're going to be in a much better position to come out of this and stick your landing. But that's ultimately what we want to do if adherence is starting to become a strain. If it's like slowly becoming reduced over time, like we can't ignore it. Like disassociation, just pushing through, even in a contest prep, is not the answer. And I'll say another big one that I notice with a handful of clients is that even if dietary adherence is very much on point and that's unchanged, what will start to happen is their cardio sessions aren't nearly as impactful. So I give my clients like target cardio heart rates to hit. This is something like you can do. You don't need an Apple Watch. You can get like a Wise, WYZE. You can get a Wise watch that'll just track heart rate. The heart rate monitors on the machine are not great, but I mean, like, generally a good rule of thumb is that if you're doing cardio and you're talking the way I am right now, then your heart rate's probably not high enough. You shouldn't really be able to hold a conversation, or it should be uncomfortable to hold a conversation. And if that's where you are, then you know, okay, like I am working hard, but there's a big difference between doing cardio at a speed, at an intensity, at an incline, at a level in which like you have to focus on what you're doing and you're sweating a little bit. I don't really sweat all the time like when I do cardio or train. I mean, point aside, but there's a big difference between doing that and walking the dog. And something I saw with a client this week, he's the same one who was like, yeah, like I'm doing everything right. I'm packing all my meals, and like I realized, oh, like he's pre-ordering Chipotle and having that as a part of his meals, like, not realizing the sodium and the fat content is pretty variable, like, just in generally given the prep. But he also was reducing his cardio intensity, and I noticed this in his sheet. I'm like, "You went from sustaining, like, 120, 130 in this whole week," like, he did the duration, but it was only, like, 95, 100 beats per minute on average, and he's like, "Yeah, but I did more," and I'm like, those are closer to steps than they are structured cardio. They don't have the same value. So that's where we really should try to keep things as consistent as possible. And if something's slipping through the cracks, let's really hone in on what alternatives there are, what solutions we have at hand. But rather than just assume your metabolism is slowing down or that you're stuck at a true set point. Let's actually test it. So, the next week, if this is you, get really dialed in. Go through your foods and be just tremendously honest with yourself. I had another client who's like, hey, I just threw out the granola because I know that like I get a little snacky. And I'm like, girl, like that would have been good to know 4 weeks ago when you were saying, like, I don't know why I'm losing weight. If you're mentioning that you have to throw this out, that tells me that there were probably aspects to your day that just included, reaching in, having a little handful if you're making it for yourself, making it for your husband, for your kids. And these are things like it's good to like catch them, but that's my challenge to you is if there's anything offhand that you're like, yeah, but that's okay. That's like my slush fund, but it's still untracked. Let's tighten up the reins here. Food tracking, weighing yourself, weighing what you're eating, weighing it when it's cooked before you've manipulated it with a cooking process that reduces weight, i.e., potatoes, rice, too, proteins. Like these are all areas that you can get a little tighter in, keeping cardio consistent, making sure there's just nothing that like offhand is like finding its way calorically into your diet. And if the scale moves, you know that it was just those small details. And if it doesn't, then we have clear data that, you might need a little bit of a maintenance phase, maybe to improve dietary adherence if that is the issue. If hormonally it seems like, okay, like I'm seeing scale weight move, but it's just not at the rate that I want it to, then let's check it. Let's get these labs done. But either way, this is just information. It is not judgment. I think you can benefit a lot from getting curious, running the experiment, and seeing what your body has to say. You guys, thank you for listening. I do offer one-on-one coaching that is not just limited to competitors. I also work with lifestyle clients that, frankly, want a style of coaching that is more comprehensive than what they're used to. They want the attention to detail that they assume competitors get. I do offer weekly calls. I take on clients where we're meeting for a 20-minute call each and every week. A lot of them, they find that it's just more efficient, especially if people are super busy and they don't want to necessarily go through the whole process of typing up an email, receiving an email. They just want it one and done. You can find the links to both of these services, both types of coaching, email or calls, within the description below. As always, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.